Habari gani, karibuni, asanteni kuwa nasi. Thank you all for joining us again today. I'm joined by my brothers to talk about a subject that we do not speak on enough. I'm going to quickly let our brothers introduce themselves and then we're going to start the show. Ndugu Wabadele, tafadhali wajulishe, jitambulishe.
Midine Obinfo Obadele Kambon, Urupa Mini Obinfo Obadele Kambon, Langu ni Obinfo Obadele Kambon. So my name is Obinfo Obadele Kambon, for those who didn't get it the first 3 times. I am the founder of Abibitumi, that translates to Black Power in the Chi language. What we realize is that in reclaiming our languages, oftentimes there isn't a very strong discourse on Black power, Black liberation, things of that nature. So we had to coin our own terms using our own languages. So we teach Chi, Yoruba, Wolof, Medu. Now we have Kiswahili, thanks to Dada and Nduku. And that's the only way you were able to drag me onto this cracker platform, because otherwise I would not come. I won't stay here for long either. But shout out to Dada and Nduku, Abibitumi, Abibifahudia.
Abibitumi. Asante sana kwa kuja. Ndugu Ilarote.
Do you want to go in terms of African protocol first?
Ndugu Jabali, thank you for the reminder. Thank you. We hold each other accountable. Ndugu Jabali.
I'm Jumbo. Jina langu ni Jabali Akevo. So hello everyone. My name is Jabali Akevo.
See, I didn't even want you guys to translate it into English. I wanted you to say it in tweet, drop it, they take it or leave it. You drop it in Kiswahili, they take it or leave it. Ndugu Masala, tafadhali.
Habari gani nyote, mimi naitwa Langston Morrison Rote Masala Morrison. Mimi natokea Jamaica na America. So I've been learning Kiswahili for a while, and I've been on a decolonization journey. I say this all the time, but I speak a lot of different languages, but I'm ready to come home and be with our African languages. So that's why last year I started learning Twi. I also speak another African language called Echo, spoken in Bioko Island, Equatorial Guinea. And I've been learning Kiswahili with Jumuiya, Nguzo Saba, as a community member for about, how long now? 6-7 months now? How much?
Not long enough. We'll continue learning longer. This is a life. It's a lifestyle, like they like to say it in the West. It's a lifestyle. Hi, Basi. So we're going to play this week. There has been a conference, an African languages conference. Ndugu, there has been an African languages conference, a virtual one. For those of you who are on LinkedIn, it's showing on LinkedIn and Facebook, I believe, and I'll be sharing the link here. And most of the presentations have been in African languages. It's not perfect, but it's really great. For those of you who are interested in hearing and sitting with African languages, I recommend that you attend the remaining sessions. I believe there are sessions tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Again, I will share the link. The beginning of the conference, I had the opportunity to share about Kiswahili, the importance of Kiswahili, the infection in Kiswahili, and the fact that Kiswahili is actually an African language and not, as many say, an Arabic language or a pidgin between African languages and Arabic language. So we're going to share the video of my presentation, and then my brothers and I will discuss the things spoken of on the presentation and much more about our African languages. Hi, Basi. Asanteni. Just stay tuned. You all seeing the video? Yes.
Hapana.
You cannot see the video?
No. I see this.
It's like a flyer.
I see the thumbnail.
Oh, but
Yeah.
you can see the flyer. Sorry. It's not on yet. There we go. Ay, jamani. Bear with us. Give me 1 second. Let me just remove it and bring it back on. Sorry about that. Ndugu Jabali, why did you start learning Kiswahili?
Originally, I started learning Kiswahili really just because I wanted to speak another African language. I wanted to speak an African language, excuse me. Then I started doing research, and I found that Kiswahili was the most spoken African language. And I started just doing further research into, it being the language of Pan-Africanism, etc. That's what really made me buy in and continue my learning.
Ndugu Masala, why did you start learning Kiswahili?
I'm sorry, my internet just cut out, so I missed your entire answer to that question. But I started learning Kiswahili because, like I said, I'm on a decolonization journey, and I think there's only so much you can do in terms of...
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the African language.
One quick, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
There's only so much you can do in terms of decolonization in English, right? If you really want to really decolonize your mind, decolonize your thoughts, decolonize the way you do things, decolonize your practices, you need to learn an African language. If you're an African and you're trying to decolonize your mind, you need to learn an African language.
Hi, Basi. Okay, so we have the video. We're going to play it and then we'll discuss it. All right. And please share your thoughts in the chat as we watch the video. Share any questions you want us to address. Share any observations that you want us to address, tafadhali. Thank you.
Languages Conference. This is our very first session of the conference. We just had the opening ceremony a few minutes ago, and it was amazing. So this is the third edition of the African Languages Conference. We organized it in 2023 and 2022. And as I mentioned during the opening ceremony, the highlights for me for this particular event is the fact that we have it in our African languages, not only in English and French. So it's truly amazing. So this conference is organized by myself. My name is Adina Maran Kulibali. I work with Bolingo Consults. My co-organizers are Avishta Sirius from Lingua Cultura Experience, Christian Elonge from Cabot Group. We have a sponsor, Hybrid Links, and then we have the support of the African Academy of Languages. This event is meant to celebrate the African Languages Week and also to celebrate our African languages, our diversity, and everything that we stand for as Africans. And so we are truly glad that you are able to make it to this conference. It's also live on Facebook. I'll share the link as well for those who want to share it with their network. You can share the Facebook live link. I'll also share our social media handles. Thank you once again for joining this particular conference. I'll give the floor to our speaker here to introduce herself and to also give us a description of her session and what she'll be talking about. Thank you very much.
Asante. Habari gani wa Afrika wenzangu? Kwa majina ninaitwa Nduku Mulumba. Asili yangu ni nchi ya Kenya, lakini wakati huu niko nchi ya Marekani. So kwanza ningependa kusema asante kwa kupata nafasi hii ya kushirikiana nanyi kuhusu umuhimu wa Kiswahili na asili yake, nje ya maelezeo ambayo yametolewa na wakoloni. Ingekuwa bora kama ningeweza kuelezea maoni yangu yote katika lugha ya Kiswahili, lakini bado hatujafika hapo. Lugha ya Kiswahili haijaenea kwa mapana ya Afrika kokote Waafrika waliopo. Idadi kubwa ya Waafrika duniani kote hawaelewi Kiswahili, na ni muhimu wasikie maoni yetu ili waone umuhimu wa lugha hii yetu ya umoja na wafanye juhudi kujifunza haraka iwezekanavyo. Sisi wanajumuiya wa Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba tunatarajia kuwa hivi karibuni sisi Waafrika wote tutaweza kuwasiliana katika lugha ya Kiswahili kokote tuendapo Afrika na duniani kote. So I am sorry for those who did not understand what I said. Hopefully, eventually when you get the recording, if you do, you'll be able to get the translation. Most of my presentation is based on my personal relationship with Kiswahili as a mwenyeji, and my observation of its relation to other African languages, popularly known as Bantu languages, having been in relationship with them too, as a Mkamba in community with fellow Africans of the Kikuyu, the Meru, the Luganda, the Shona, the Nkosa, and the Zulu peoples, among the many other Bantu peoples. Growing up in Kenya, I was lucky enough to go to school in different areas of Kenya where I encountered peoples of Kenya who spoke different languages, a lot of them being Bantus. It is in hearing the very many similarities to Kiswahili in these languages that we at Jumuiya Nguzo Saba concluded that Kiswahili must be an African language. It must be an African tongue. I remember the first time I heard the Congolese Kiswahili way of counting, I sat back and wondered, I know, given my relationship with African languages, that we are very literal people. Like, we say it as it is. So here I am encountering Kiswahili, and the number hamsini, which is Kiswahili sanifu, that is standard Kiswahili, is makumi matano. And therefore, to me, I saw that this must be the original way these people who created these languages chose to call this number. And therefore, there must have been an infection that came in by the Arabic that took away that original way of saying makumi matano and brought in hamsini, the Arabic infection. And we at Jumuiya Nguzo Saba are calling it an infection because we have Kiswahili that was well, and then now it is in all kinds of forms to the point where Africans can't even recognize it, and therefore it is ill and has an infection. I'll start my presentation now. Can you see it? Someone just let me know because I can't see the video anymore.
Not yet. We can't see your presentation.
Oh, because I'm not sharing. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Because I'm not sharing. I have to do that first, don't I?
Yeah.
All right, we can see it now?
Yes. Thank you.
And it looks good. And just want to hide this. So that I have control of my screen. Bear with me. There we go. All right. So again, I am a member of Jumuiya Nguzo Saba. We are an organization, a community, currently based in the US, but a global community of Swahili-speaking people. We are grounded on the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, but literally on Ubuntu, the fact that I am because you are, and knowing that every action that we take affects our fellow human beings and vice versa. We'll start with, let me just put this down. There we go. All right, so Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. Let's just state that from today on, Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. No more arguments as to whether Kiswahili is Arabic or African. Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. There's a saying that has been going around East Africa for years now. Kiswahili was born in Tanzania. It got sick in Kenya and it died in Uganda or Congo, some people say. Now look at the map I'm showing you all right now and tell me whether you see Kenya, Tanzania, or Congo in that map. But you can see Bantu speaking people located in different areas that eventually are called Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Congo, right? Kiswahili, how could the fact that Kiswahili is an Arabic language be true, or that it started in Tanzania, got sick in Kenya, and died in Congo or Uganda be true if there were no borders at that time, right? So we could not designate where Kiswahili started at that time. The Berlin Conference had not even happened. The Berlin Conference started in November 1884 and ended in February 1885. Kiswahili had started way before that. So we know the borders come into Africa once the Berlin Conference starts. And therefore, we cannot say that Kiswahili started from Tanzania, got sick in Kenya and died in Uganda or Congo. And given the fact that I talked about the makumi matano and how similar it is to the way we speak, therefore then the evidence is there that Congo did not kill Kiswahili. So it's about time we stop spreading that rumor. David P.B. Masamba, in his book Historia ya Kiswahili 50 BK hadi 1500 BK, says, katika kuvichunguza vyanzo vya kiisimu tuliona kwamba lugha ya Kiswahili ina uhusiano wa karibu sana na lugha ya Kibantu. So it's very closely related to Bantu languages, lugha za Kibantu. Ingawa lugha hii ina maneno mengi kutoka lugha za kigeni, lakini msamiati wake wa msingi, its primary vocabulary, unapatikana pia katika lugha nyingine za Kibantu, is found in other Bantu languages. Muundo wake wa sarufi ni wa Kibantu, mfumo wake wa majina ngeli ni wa Kibantu, mfumo wake wa morfolojia ni wa Kibantu, mfumo wake wa fonolojia ni wa Kibantu na kadhalika. Uhusiano huu muhimu ndio uliowafanya wataalamu na mabingwa mbalimbali wa isimu kufikia hitimisho kwamba kwa kila hali lugha ya Kiswahili inafungamana sana na lugha nyingine za aina yake na ambazo kwa pamoja zimepewa lakabu ya lugha za Kibantu. So it is essentially a Bantu language because there's evidence. It's in the way the vocabulary is set up, in the speech patterns that match other Bantu languages. And again, as I said, as a Kamba speaker, and having gone to school with Kikuyus, Merus, Embus, once I came to the diaspora, met people from Nkosa, Shona, Luganda communities, I know that I could hear, every time we got together, I could hear similarities in Kiswahili in all these languages. And therefore I questioned, how could this be an Arabic language if there were so many similarities to African languages? We at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, and I want to thank my brother, Jabali Ekevu, who's working on this analysis, have been doing some analysis to show the similarities between the different Bantu languages in Africa, and to give the evidence that shows that Kiswahili is truly, truly a Bantu language and an African language. We believe that once the peoples, as I showed you the map before, once the Bantu people settled in that area, Afrika Mashariki of Africa, they had to figure out a way of having one united language so that they can trade, so that they can intermarry, they can socialize, they can have a common spiritual practice, and so that they can have security for themselves. And in this way is how they formed Kiswahili. So I'm not sure if everyone can see clearly in the screen, the different languages that we have. But in his research, Mzee Masamba concludes that there is evidence in the other Bantu languages that Kiswahili, having so many Bantu words in it, is a Bantu language itself, despite the infection. Infection is our term, not his, the infection from foreign languages. And we know the foreign languages that end up infecting Kiswahili in Afrika Mashariki area is not just Arabic. You had Portuguese, you had German, you have English, and all these languages ended up infecting. As we continue the research, I have my brother calling me or sending me messages during the day and saying, hey, look at this word in Kiswahili that we use now in Kiswahili Sanifu. Isn't it a word in Farsi, right? So things like that, because the Oman peoples settled in that, invaded that area. And because they took a position of power, they controlled everything that was going on in that area, including the languages. So we'll just look at number 1 to 5 to show the evidence that Kiswahili is indeed a Bantu language. You have number 1 here, Kiswahili. We have Lingala, Kishona, Kibundu, Kituba, Kikunda, Kichechewa, Kitumbuka na Kibemba. In Kiswahili, we say moja for 1. In Kilingala, moko. In Kishona, motsi. Kibundu, mochi. Kituba, mosi. Mo, modzi. Chimoza, mo. All of them having that mo root in them, right? Number 2, in Kiswahili, we say mbili. In Lingala, mibale. In Zulu, kubili. in Kinyarwanda kabiri, in Kirundi kabiri, in Kunda wili, Mbunda vivali, kali, mbiri, vibili, bili, bebale, mbiri, mbili, ili, iwili. Again, the root is there, and you can see the similarity in all those different Bantu languages. Number 3 in Kiswahili is tatu. You have in Lingala misato, katathu, tatu, gatatu, tatu, gatatu, tatu, tatu, vitatu. I mean, I don't know how much evidence you all need, Africans, for you to finally embrace this as your language, but I hope this is showing you that this really is your language, and it's about time we stop detaching from the language and claiming that we are not reclaiming it because it is an Arabic language, right? Number 4 in Kiswahili is nne. In Lingala, minei. In Zulu, kune. In Kinyarwanda, kane. Kirundi, kane. Kunda, nne. Luganda, nya. So you can see the similarity there too. In Kiswahili, number 5 is tano. In Lingala, mitano. Zulu, kulanu, shanu. Gautano in Kinyarwanda. Kibundu, tano. Kirundi, gatanu. Tanu, sano, vitanu, sanu, katano. You can see the evidence there. So again, if anyone ever asks you, and we will have this, our website is coming up soon, so we'll have all this there for you in case someone needs you to show them the evidence. Show me the evidence that Kiswahili is a Bantu language. You can send them to that website and they can see this. The colonial infection. So I didn't want to highlight the invaders in this presentation, but I figured, you know what, let's give both sides of the story. Let's show what they saw in us. And so therefore, Derek Nurse and Thomas T. Spear, in their observation of Kiswahili, the Swahili, reconstructing the history and language of an African society, 1800 to 1500, ethnohistory. First of all, it's 1800 to 1500. Kiswahili has already started before 800. So how exactly are you going to be talking about a language that started before you're writing about it and acting as if you're an expert in it? But I digress. They say that the Swahili language has undergone spectacular growth during the last century as a result of the language policies of the colonial and independent governments. And today it is spoken by more than 30 million people throughout Eastern Africa. And leave it to the colonial entities to feel like they're the ones who have given progress to Kiswahili. I would say that Kiswahili has experienced an infection, we would say that Kiswahili has experienced an infection as a result of the language policies of the colonial and neo-colonial independent governments. And any growth that Kiswahili has seen has been as a result of the East, Central, and Southern African peoples who maintained their Bantu mindset in this African language of unity, Kiswahili. You had the evidence in our speaker today, our main speaker, Nduku Lang's presentation, how different, and before, during the opening ceremony, several Kenyans, and I'm so proud to hear several Kenyans stepping up and talking about how they're working on preserving and spreading Kiswahili, came up and said they're doing this, they're doing that, starting organizations to preserve. So it is our efforts that have sustained Kiswahili and preserved it, not anyone else's, not the colonial government. In fact, it's the contrary. The colonial government tried to destroy Kiswahili. I remember going to school in Kenya. I went to school in Kenya, where we were punished if we spoke other languages outside of English. You were required to speak English. And therefore, you can imagine what that does to a child. You're going to school for 8, 12 years, and you cannot speak your own African languages. In fact, you're shamed when you speak your African languages, because we had to wear this, I forget what it was called, but this wooden necklace, right? That showed that you were to be shamed because you had spoken outside of English. And therefore you associate shame with your African languages and you start detaching from it. So it's about time Africans came back to our African languages and take away that shame from our being. You all know Kenya was formerly colonized by the British, and its education system is still heavily influenced by the British. I was so disappointed to find out that throughout my school years, the Kenyan tests that we took, I hope it has changed now, were being sent to Britain to be evaluated, right? That's ridiculous. We as Africans are taking exams to determine our level of intelligence, of qualification to move up to the next level, and it's being taken to our former colonial oppressor, I will say, to evaluate how well we did from an outside perspective, not from a cultural perspective, right? So I am looking forward to seeing us walk away from those practices. Is Kiswahili an Arabic pidgin language? So again, we're going to give both sides of the story. Mzee Masamba in Historia, the book. And for those of you who would like to get the book, it's in all Kiswahili. This is the book I'm talking about. It's in Kiswahili. He refutes both Mazrui's and Sharif's arguments that Kiswahili is a pidgin language that was created out of Bantu languages mixed with Arabic. Masamba points out that Mazrui and Sharif do not explain why this huge percentage of Arabic, which they claim words in Kiswahili, ended up being a small percentage compared to the Bantu influence, right? He also points out that they do not show the evidence why a founding language, in this case Arabic, would change its morphology and phonology to follow that of Bantu languages. So we were asking the question, how much did Kiswahili influence Arabic? We've all talked about, Arabic influence, because we've been brought up with this mindset that our culture is always the one affected, right? We are the subordinate. It's always them who are above us, and therefore it's them who are going to affect us. But no, maybe Kiswahili affected and infected and influenced Arabic. He points out that they claim to have used the sociolinguistic foundations of Kiswahili, both Mazrui and Sharif, to justify their conclusions, but the very same sociolinguistic foundation, as I showed in the evidence before prepared by our brother Jabali Ekevu, is evidence that Kiswahili is a Bantu language. So again, refuting their arguments, and we can bury them in history moving forward. The language, I could not do a presentation without pointing out our Mzee Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I just could not. I wish I had pointed out more of him because he's done such great work in as far as African languages go. So language is a vehicle to culture. We've heard that. We recently had a talk with Dr. Kanyisile from South Africa, who told us the very thing, that language is the vehicle to culture. Culture is the vehicle to our African spirituality. The three of them is our full African being. We have been detached from this and we must return to it. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in his book, Decolonizing the Mind, for those of you who wonder how the book looks like, this is the book, says that language, any language, but with his heart settling on African languages, right, has a dual character. It is both a means of communication and carrier, the vehicle of culture. And therefore, when you think about it, we have been detached from our culture. Language is the vehicle to our culture. You best all Africans get on that vehicle and go back to your culture. So just a side note, as Africans, we have been a lost people because we have been so far removed from our African cultures in the pursuit of Western culture, believing the false narrative that we are more intelligent, the better we speak, look, and behave like Westerners. I know I'll get hit, but that's okay. This is part of the work of decolonizing everything that we are doing, including our minds, is pointing out the colonialism in everything that we do, the way that we dress, the way that we talk, the way that we talk about ourselves, the way that we talk about the rest of the world. So this thing of Africans wanting to sound British, this thing of African wanting to sound American, this thing of Africans wanting to sound French. I remember when I first got here and I went back home after 10 years and I was told, you still sound Kenyan. I said, of course I still sound Kenyan. I'm Kenyan. So we need to stop yearning to sound like those who colonized us and still oppress us. There is some psychological dysfunction going on there, and we need to come away from it and find some healing. These folk even duped us into believing that this African language, Kiswahili, of unity is not really ours, but belongs to the Arabs, therefore creating a hostility within us to our own language, right? So if I was a colonizer, if I ever was, God forbid, or any entity that wants to take power and dominance over our people of Africa. And I go to where they are and I realize that they are united by a common language. So I get to Afrika Mashariki and I see that they're getting along. They have this language. I can hear they speak different languages when they move away from each other, but when they're together, they have this language. And it sounds similar to the ones that they were speaking. And it seems like they get along when they speak this language. Of course, I'm going to take away that language so that I can sow disunity amongst them and make it easier to control them. So this is the very thing that the Arabs, I'm sorry to our keynote speaker, I have to say this, Arabic is not our language. Arabic is not an African language, 100% not an African language. It might be predominantly spoken in North Africa. It is not our language. It is the language of the invaders of those parts of Africa. And it was forced, literally forced down our throats. People were killed if they didn't speak it. So we as Africans need to move away from that dysfunction of calling things that are not ours, right? To us Africans, this nature of exploitation and dominance is not inherently our way. So me assuming I was a colonizer, and maybe that is why it has taken us so long to see the deceptive ways of those who have invaded our motherland. Maybe that's why it's taking us so long to see Arabic as something that was forced on us and that is not ours, right? And the comfort of the fact that we have been speaking it, we don't know any history unless we read, we don't know any history beyond us speaking it, and the comfort where we don't want to move away from it. But the evidence shows that Arabic is not an African language. Where do we go from here? I had to take my hat off for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his question, right? Where do we go from here as Africans? Now that we know, now that we have identified the problem, we must put together a solution, right? We have learned that Kiswahili is our African language of unity, that it brought African peoples from different tongues together, one tongue for the sake of trade, social well-being and security. We had many, many other reasons, I'm sure. We have learned that there was deliberate action taken to infect the language and take it from us. So before the Arabs get there, Africans are not writing on paper. They're not recording their language on paper. The Arabs get there. And therefore, if they're going to be the ones controlling the writing, they're going to use their bias to do that. And it's going to influence what ends up on the paper, right? It's not going to hold you up as the African. In his book, Masamba also points out the fact that the people who came, especially the Westerners who came to Africa, always looked at African progress, right? The fact that Africans could have created a language, Africans could have created the pyramids, Africans could have created the Great Wall in Zimbabwe. They looked at that and they were like, nah, it can't be true, can't be true. Because they have to justify that these beings that they have found are not human. And therefore, there's no way they're going to acknowledge that these beings have human qualities, like advancing their civilization, right? So they took that away from them. And this is what they record, that it must be someone else. It must be the Arabs who created this language that these people speak. And we have believed that false narrative all these years. So to those who claim that learning Kiswahili will make them, I have my brothers and sisters from West Africa. Again, I am saying these things in love. This is the tough love that you all talk about. We cannot continue to cuddle each other and pretend that this is not happening because we don't want to hurt each other's feelings. When I speak to my brothers and sisters from West Africa and I tell them they need to learn Kiswahili, I've gotten some pushback from some of them because they claim if they learn Kiswahili, if we make Kiswahili the African language, it's going to take them away from their African languages, right? It will take them away from Yoruba. It will take them away from Hausa. It will take them away from Wolof. And I say to that, firstly, I don't see you fighting as hard against the colonial languages that you speak, right? Let's be honest with each other. We want to claim French, we want to claim Arabic, we want to claim English, but we don't want to claim Kiswahili. And secondly, myself and many other Africans started learning and speaking Kiswahili as children, and it never took away our mother tongues. No, nine na kikamba, no mundi. Na likasimu nina inyakwa nine na kikamba. That's me speaking Kikamba. I have not forgotten it, despite speaking Kiswahili all these years, right? And I speak fluently, despite my relationship with Kiswahili all my life. I have been able, like again, our speaker said, Ndugu, that we are a multilingual people and are able to speak. See, now I'm doing the presentation and seeing spelling errors, but I digress. To speak multiple languages at the same time without taking away from one or the other. Well, excuse me. So I also could not do the presentation without giving a nod to Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. The idea of communalism, the idea that you will act well so that your fellow human beings can be well. So let's take, for example, Ubuntu. And for those of you who follow me on Kumbukeni, I am a co-host there. You saw our show this past weekend that we had our guest, Dr. Nyaka Lagoke, who spoke about the philosophy of Ubuntu and showed the evidence in multiple languages, not just in Southern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, but West Africa. The similarity of this word in different ways in all these areas, showing that this is a practice that is very African, not just South African, very African. It may be known as Ubuntu in Southern Africa, but it is known as many other things, but practiced everywhere else in Africa. So the spirit of being one with your fellow human beings and the environment, knowing that whatever action you take will affect others, as will theirs, you. And therefore, you choose to be a responsible member of community who strives to always do what you can to contribute positively to the lives of fellow human beings and to your environment, which sustains you and your community. We talk about climate change. We want to talk about climate change and have conferences and all that, but we're not practicing in the spirit of Ubuntu. Yes, especially you, African leaders. You're not leading by example by living in the spirit of Ubuntu. You're selling African land to foreigners who are misusing it, right? African land should not be sold. African land should not be sold, especially to outsiders. So we need to return to our way of Ubuntu. The spirit, though called something different, like I said, is evident in many African tongues to be there and practiced by all Africans. There are things about protocol, things about how we interact with the environment, things about our relationship with the divine, the deities and our ancestors that are common throughout Africa and are evident in all the African people's tongues and cultures. We've been far removed, again, I cannot say this enough, we've been far removed from this African being, the language, the culture, and the spirituality for so long that it may be difficult for most to see this connection between us, the similarities, right? We have Africans fighting on Clubhouse, we have African fighting in conferences, arguing about their differences instead of seeing how similar they are. We must reclaim our African being and return to this way so that we can heal the maafa that has been brought upon us, African people, and our land. I say our land and I think of Congo. That is maafa on the land itself. And if you do not think that land is living, then I don't know where you think your food comes from. And that act of ripping and pillaging the land constantly without giving back to her is traumatizing to the land. Kufunza na kujifunza Kiswahili. So again, Dr. King asks, where do we go from here? We must teach and learn Kiswahili. I was very happy to hear all these Kenyans come off mic and talk about they're doing this, teaching this, interpreting, translating, recording. We cannot continue to exist in a foreign tongue and culture far removed from our African being, right? When you go to Germany, again, our main speaker spoke about it. When you go to Germany, you'll find that everything is in German. This is the case in most of Europe, in European nations. When you go to China, everything is in Chinese. They have learned other foreign languages, but have maintained their own languages and cultures. This example is not for us to emulate them. Like I didn't give this example for us to say, okay, let's be like the white man because they did this, let's do this. No, it's for us to see that these people we try to emulate, they are not doing what we do. They are holding on to their languages and their cultures. So why are we trying so hard to be like them when it is destroying us? So the solution, again, we go back to BRICS, right? Africans currently think that BRICS is God sent. The solution is not to take on Chinese or Russian cultures, no, or to speak Mandarin, or to start teaching Mandarin, or to start teaching Kung Fu and building Chinese buildings in Africa and changing your road signs into Chinese road signs. No, that's not the solution, because that, again, is not our way of being, and it will still keep us away from our full African being. We must return to our original ways of being, not necessarily erasing progress, because Africans worry about that, right? What about the progress we've made? No, I'm not saying take away progress. I'm saying return, but wisely knowing what is aligned with our ways and what isn't, right? We have to analyze. We have to sit down together and say, what things have worked with us? What things are most aligned with the way of Ubuntu? What things are not? The things that are, we take on, and the things that aren't, we dump and walk away from. Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba proposes that everyone, and I'm saying every single one, of the 54 African nations start teaching Kiswahili in their schools. Add Kiswahili to your curriculums. We propose that Kiswahili be the official language of doing business in the African Union. Non-Africans can get translators if attending joint meetings with the AU. They can. You go to the UN, you have translators. I see you all with your little mics. They can do the same when they come to Africa. And you know what? They can hire Africans to do the translation, creating jobs in Africa. I'm not sure when Africans were invited to the room. When were we invited to the room where the world decided that English was going to be the official language? I don't know. I mean, I'm being facetious, but we weren't. And therefore, why are we following along as if we were part of this decision that English is going to be the official language? At least we know with Kiswahili, there's evidence that peoples came together, worked jointly, and built a common language, right? We understand at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba that it's a journey to go back and reclaim our language, but we must start now. We can no longer delay it. The evolution of Kiswahili going forward. So how are we, as stewards of Kiswahili, as the people of Ubuntu, going to preserve this language? How are we going to make sure that the infection is removed and it does not continue to be infected further, right? Kiswahili was originally, as presented and as the evidence has shown, created by different Bantu-speaking peoples. We at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba and our friends and other Africans who are working with us are proposing that as we return to our African language of unity, which was meant to evolve as time goes by, we should start bringing in other African languages from all over Africa, right? Bring in languages from West Africa, bring in languages from North Africa, not Arabic, I must emphasize. Bring in other African languages so that it feels more inclusive and more something that is theirs that they can relate to. I was talking to someone the other day and they told me a word in Akan and it has K-Y-A and they said cha. I said, wait a minute, what did you say? Cha, K-Y-A, cha. I said, that's the same thing we say in Kikamba. In Kikamba, if I have K-Y-A-L-O, which is the name Chalo, we say Chalo, K-Y-A. So similarity between peoples who are in Africa Mashariki and the peoples who are in the West, but using the same phonology, the same speech patterns. So as we continue to, as Kiswahili continues to evolve, we can start bringing in words, taking away the infection, taking away the Hamsini, taking away the Arabic and bringing in words from other African languages. The Kiswahili should be the language of interacting across Africa in trade, spirituality, social activities, security, and defense. I know there are going to be presentations talking about doing business in French and whatever other language. No. And I will say, and this is not being said to criticize. This is being said to point out how we can do better. I was very disappointed when first invited to speak that Kiswahili was not listed in the languages that were given for today, right? While English, Portuguese, French were there. English, Portuguese, and French should find no place in any African event before Kiswahili is there. So we at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba suggest that we use these foreign languages only in cases where we are interacting with these peoples who originally speak these languages, and in situations where Africans are gathering with them as the hosting party. And I'll side note there, we need to start being the hosting party when it comes to these talks of Africa being the future, right? Africa having the resources, Africa having the youth resources, the youngest people, the most youngest people in the world. If they want to talk to us about our value, they need to start coming to the continent to do that. We need to stop going to their homes to talk about our value. And when they do come, we will speak in Kiswahili and they will get translators to help them understand what we are saying. The future of the African Languages Conference. Again, my sisters and my brothers, I thank you very much for putting this together. But I must say this, I cannot be a defender of African languages if I don't say this. How can we do better? We hope that in the years to come, the African Languages Conference will only have African languages and Africans showcased, right? We cannot have others continue to speak to us about our cultures. I know there's going to be a presentation about translations and what the standards of translations are. The standard cannot be Western. We are Africans, we're translating our languages. We know them best. Westerners cannot tell us how to translate. If they're not happy with the translation, oh well, right? It is how we see it, not how they tell us we should see it. And this includes descendants of those who invaded our motherland and settled as if the land belonged to them. There are many African languages that we would like to learn more about. I don't want to hear about French and Portuguese before I hear about Wolof. I don't want Wolof to not have a chance to speak today. I don't want Giriama to not have a chance to speak today and French has a chance to speak today. I hope that this conference continues to focus on those languages instead of the languages of those who invaded and colonized our peoples. Kiswahili stayed alive in Congo. Let's take away that rumor that it died there, right? Given our belief that Kiswahili has remained the purest, devoid of foreign influence in the region of Congo, where they still count in terms of 10 twos, 10 threes, makumi mane, makumi matano, and so on. We seek to do further research, Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, to uncover this true history and reclaim our language, removing all the infection from it that may separate us from our African being. Again, language is the vehicle to culture, culture is the vehicle to spirituality. All three, that is our African being. This effort in reclaiming our culture and unity as African peoples across the globe through Kiswahili will require financial support from the community. So we as Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba are reaching out to our community, asking that you support. We are on LinkedIn. The links are there. We are on email. The link is there. Our website is coming up soon, so look out for that. We're on Zelle, Cash App, PayPal. Support the work. Again, the hashtag is Changia Kazi Muhimu. Asanteni.
Very, very powerful presentation.
Dada Nduku, you're on mute.
Asante sana ndugu yangu. That was interesting listening.
Ndio, makofi nyingi.
Asante. Kazi ni yetu sisi pamoja. Tumekuwa tukifanya kazi pamoja. Ndugu Jabali amesaidia, umesaidia, ndugu Obadele ambaye ataungana nasi hivi karibuni amesaidia. Sisi sote tunafanya kazi pamoja, sivyo? Lazima tuungane tufanye kazi pamoja. Hakuna mtu mmoja, hata mmoja, hata wale ambao wanajiita viongozi, hakuna mtu mmoja ambaye ana ujuzi wote. Mtu hata mmoja ambaye ndiye mwenye ujuzi. Kwa sababu ujuzi wetu umetokana na wale ambao tunashirikiana nao, wahenga, wale ambao wako katika maisha yetu, wazazi wetu, watoto wetu, rafiki zetu, jirani zetu. Kwa hivyo siwezi sema mimi ati sasa nisimame niseme mimi ndio nimegundua kuwa Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu peke yake. Nimezungumza na ndugu Obadele, nimezungumza nawe Masala, nimezungumza na ndugu Jabali, tukakubaliana kuwa tunaangalia lugha hizi tofauti za Kibantu na tunaona kuwa Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. All right. For those of you who do not speak the language yet, I will not keep you in the dark for too long. So I have my brothers here. Let's talk about this. And I want to point out, I actually want us to start with this. Mazrui and Sharif, and you can tell by their names where they align with. They argue that they're the ones who've written books and emphasize that Arabic is part of the language. How much does our affiliation, and this brings in religion, right? This brings in Islam. Our loyalty to this outside entity that we are not seeing as an outside entity is affecting so much how we see ourselves as Africans, because Mazrui and Sharif are looking at Kiswahili from the lens of an Islamic man, right, dedicated to Islam. And if you're dedicated to Islam, you're dedicated to Arabic because it is the language of the religion. And therefore, does that bias affect the conclusions they come to about the language that is ours? And how is that showing up today in our day-to-day lives with Africans as we associate with Western and outside foreign ways? Ndugu Obadele, tafadhali.
Okay, so just in terms of the Arabic influence, what I can say personally is I did study Kiswahili in undergrad, and I took it for 1 semester, and I stopped because at that point, I was very, very energetic about re-Africanization and de-whitenization. And I was a bit dejected about all of the Arabic words inside of it. There was a proverb in Chi that says, and translates to, we don't run away from the fire ants in order to hop into the fire. One thing that I did become aware of at a later date, so I did take it for 1 semester, and I have always been exposed to Kiswahili because my parents, we grew up, having Kwanzaa. We actually introduced that to local schools. My parents had what was called the Umoja group. They were part of the Umoja group that were put on Kwanzaa. So, a lot of the language around, Kwanzaa, Kikombe cha Umoja, and Zawadi, and all of these types of things, Kuji cha Ugulia. So, all of those types of things, but it's not like in a conversational context. One thing that I thought was very Black powerful in terms of the work that you are doing specifically is you discuss the Arabic influence as an infection. And I think that that's a very powerful analogy. Nana Maremba Ani, she talks about, the idea of culture as your immune system. And if you have a strong immune system, it means that you're able to decide what comes in and what doesn't come in. And you find that very clearly, for example, in the English legal system. That's going to be Latin, whether you like it or not. That's going to be Latin. Where it comes to scientific terminology, again, it's going to be Greco-Roman, primarily, Greek, binomial nomenclature, all of those types of things. So they're very clear that, okay, if you want to, chit-chat in your own language, okay, all right, that's fine. But where it comes to anything that's important, we're going to decide what the language is going to be. We're going to decide what comes in. We're going to decide what is not allowed to come in. To the point where, when the Romans invaded the British Isles, the idea was that the British language itself was vernacular. Like that's the term that they used, was as vernacular. And the idea was that you could never discuss anything, scientific. You can never discuss any type of educational, content in the British language. It was unheard of. It was Latin, was the language of learning. And then even later on with the Norman invasion, the language of high society was French. And, the language of cattle herders was the British language. So, when they talk about Oxford, literally you're talking about a ford where oxen pass by. So now people talk about Oxford as though this is this high place of learning, but literally this is a nod to, the cattle herding past of these people. And this is why all of the, or not all, but a good number of the words for foods are coming from French, whereas the name of the animal is an entirely different word. That's not a normal thing. So for example, the cow is coming from the British language, but then beef, like beef is coming from, the British, language. The same thing, pig is coming from the British language, but then pork is coming from, the language of the invaders, because the idea was you can't use English to do anything, right? It's just completely a rubbish vernacular language. But nowadays, the idea is, well, English is a language of learning. How could you use your indigenous languages from the continent to do anything? And there's a quote by Mam Sekhan the joke where he says that European languages are not to be viewed like glittering diamonds under a glass bell, but rather the paths that were open to the development of those languages are open to all. And, I think that's very instructive because I remember a couple of years ago, there was this big controversy when the Minister of Education at that time, Prof. Opoko Ajimayan, said that the language of instruction should be in our own indigenous languages. And people were like, well, how would you say proton? How would you say electron? How would you say hydrogen? How could you? And, what it really brought to them was that the people don't know English very well, because all of these scientific terms are what I call Greco-Roman baby talk, right? Hydrogen just means, hydro means water, and gen means to generate. So we actually already have a word for it to generate water, and it's one of the names for the supreme being, Amusu, which is the one who gives water. You understand? If you understand helium, that's just coming from helios, the word for sun. I think we have a word for sun already. So if you just look at the paths that they use in order to make, the Brutus language, scientific language, all they did was use Greco-Roman baby talk. We could use Metanetra for that. We could use Kiswahili for that. And I think that when we're looking at Kiswahili, we can also look circumspectually, I'll use that term, in that if there's something in Arabic, what we could do is we could look at Kingwana, we could look at language, in Congo. We could look at, other quote unquote Bantu languages. We could look across the continent because a lot of the languages, the people who speak the languages have already dealt with some of these things. So in Yoruba, for example, the word for computer, Ero Yarabiasha, right? And she is Afidia Badrima. So there are terms for, scientific things. But then, again, to look at the Brutus language, all they did is look at the analog things around them and then assign names to those things. So if I have this is a mouse. What is a mouse? But a thing that crawls around, that caused the bubonic plague in the British Isles and so forth and so on. So it's like, if you know that, then why can't we use a term like ekura, which is literally the word for mouse in Chi? So it's like all of the scientific terminology, all of the medical terminology, so forth and so on. We can look inside of our own worldview. We could coin, we could do all types of things in order to get around this issue of the Arabic. So that's why I was very excited about you coming on board to Abibi Tumi to teach Kiswahili, because, really that's our future, is using our own languages. I've never spoken to any of my children in any cracker language whatsoever. We speak Chi in the household. We speak Yoruba in the household. And my children regularly watch Akili in Kiswahili, Ubongo in Kiswahili, so forth and so on. So,
see, they didn't like that he called them the cracker languages. Ndugu Badele. Aye. Ndugu Jabali, that Ndugu Ndugu Mazurui and Sharif, right? That almost like a loyalty to the religion that made them not look at the fact that were there in front of them. These are people who are in Africa and hearing these Bantu languages that all of us heard and that had us starting to doubt and question, right? How do we as Africans move away from that blind loyalty to things that have distanced us from our culture and return, like actually factually look at things without having that bias?
First of all, Kaka Bottle is back.
Hawakupenda uliwaita kraka. Wamesema
yeah, I was just, yeah, that's what it was.
Wamekusikia
Yeah, I was really finished with my point, but yes, the crackers don't like you to call crackers crackers. We still call crackers crackers, even if they try to mess with our internet connection. But yeah, I was basically finished with my point. So, Ndugu Jabali.
Tafadhali Ndugu Jabali.
No, Kaka Bottle here. Some great points that I have so many thoughts, even from the presentation to now, and even from what Kaka Bottle was saying, that I agree with so much, and I want to expand on and give my own perspective. But with the question you just asked,
No,
there's so many.
I would rather you give your own perspective on the so many thoughts that you have. Please go there.
Okay, where do I start, man? Well, I'll start with because a lot of it will tie in. I'll start with what you just asked me. So you asked me, how can we move away from these things and break that connection with pretty much the Western ideals that we've adopted, and it's a layered problem. It's a very layered issue in my opinion. And I actually want to reference. There was a couple things I wanted to reference here, and one of the articles I want to reference is from a woman that is writing from an agreement, like she's agreeing with Mazuri. So I like to read those perspectives a lot. So there's actually a paragraph here because a lot of the times it's interesting that we spend a lot of time focusing on like the past to where the point sometimes we miss what's happening in the present. You see what I'm saying? So it's a layered problem in that yes, we understand that the issues with Arabic, but there's also the issue of English and the romanization of African languages in total. So I actually wanted to read real quick, if I can, a quick paragraph from this article. The article that I'm taking this from is from a woman called Caitlin Boytman. It's Making Africa Legible, Kiswahili Arabic, and the Orthographic Romanization in Colonial Zanzibar. But again, she's agreeing with she's writing from a perspective of she's upset, from what I take from it, that the English and the Europeans were able to invade what they were already trying to establish. But it connects to all these different problems. But she writes the story of Romanization of Swahili orthography in colonial Zanzibar is one of power, ideology, nostalgia, and the loss at the nexus of these communities. It is set within the wider context of the massive orthographic shift in Africa, where indigenous languages spanning the breadth of the continent were forcibly reorthographized from Arabic to the Roman script during European colonialism. Colonial powers even sought to write the Arabic of Sudan in the Roman script. As writing across the continent, from Wolof to Hausa to Swahili, shifted from Arabic to Roman letters, European colonialism was literally a project of making African more legible to Europeans. You see what I'm saying? So it's a deeper problem because it's happening in Swahili, but even this problem, again, you know me, Dada and Nduku, I'm always going to find a way to tie this into a technology type of situation and tie all these things together with language and technology. One of the greatest problems in technology from the beginning, from its inception, is natural language processing. That is a part of technology that is affecting us as a community greatly. But what we see here is that yeah, we have the Arabic problem, and again, I agree with the Kako Badala, what he was saying with taking loan words from other African languages, like Yoruba, yeah, like Yoruba, Tree, and all these other languages that have vocabulary for things that we ended up taking from Arabic. But we also have to watch what's happening in the present with the Romanization of African languages as a whole, and the fact that without these letters and things that we can't write any African languages really. And we don't, and that ties into the westernization. So there's also, because it control, it's like a part of you, like, controls your mind. I have so many thoughts, but there's a book I wanted to reference as well. It's called Language and Colonial Power. I speak about it a lot, and I have so many pages here that I have captions uh, written down and marked up. But again, I'm jumping around here a little bit, but hold on, let me see. Is this the paragraph I wanted to? Yeah, so in this book, it speaks about how language is used to control the African mind, right? And it speaks about there's two different perspectives. So this book will leave you conflicted a lot. It will leave you conflicted a lot because you hear the direct perspectives of Europeans that agreed and Europeans that disagreed when they first got to the continent, and this was happening in the Congo. This is the French perspective, and how French was ended up influencing the Congo so greatly. But it speaks about there's perspectives in here, and one of the ones I wanted to read is from the perspective of a European that did not agree. They did not agree with the teaching of European languages in the continent, but the reasoning why is very interesting, right? But it's and the reason why is very interesting, and it speaks to today a lot of these problems that we're facing. So if I can read this real quick as well. This is from Language and Colonial Power, and real quick, it's from a gentleman. I can't pronounce a lot of these names because they're in French. Kaka
Nivizuri.
Masala would be able to, yeah. It's like Dihemtine. I can't pronounce it, but it yeah. One thing it says it would be a mistake to promote a European language in the Congo. We shall be exposed to indiscretion by the blacks, who can be counted on spreading what we would like to be kept secret. We will have to be careful all the time that our conversations won't be overheard. That there are so many which must remain secret. There are the certain documents which they should not know get into the hands of the blacks we educate. I have the impression that we do not sufficiently know the soul of the native, and that we still have a lot to study before we confide in them. So this is a guy writing back to France from the colony in Congo. So he's speaking about why. But if you heard some of his reasons, and they go on further to say the quintessence, excuse me, I can't even pronounce this, of the documented expose. Again, this is some French article that they were writing. It says that teach the blacks to read French, and they will give himself over to the revolutionary and pornographic French papers, and he will be after all the novels and other immoral books published in the French language. And this gentleman concludes, going on teaching French to the Negro, and you'll morally destroy the race while at the same time preparing the revolution, which will chase you, which, by the way, is what you deserve, and shares his views. So it's very interesting. This book gives us a lot of perspective on how, like, even some Europeans saw how today, if I would argue that we now speak these European languages, and morally we have changed a lot, as this person was pointing out. Morally, we have definitely changed a lot, and I'm not sure. I'm not the most educated person, but I'm not sure about the history of porn in African societies. But he stated that if we teach them French, next thing you know, they'll be looking at French porn and doing all this other crazy stuff, and it ties into, so it's a deep. There's so many deep problems with language and how it ties to, like, how you view the world, how you move throughout the world, just how you think. So and again, this book goes on. I have so many more quotes I could quote from here. It's definitely a book I would tell people to invest in, because it speaks about the use of Swahili. It speaks about the use of a lot of different languages, and ultimately how French ended up winning that battle. But with decolonializing Swahili per se, again, I'm doing research. I'm still trying to do research in analyzing these languages. I'm still trying to write more code and do some stuff to analyze these different similarities. But with going forward, it's the layered problem in which I believe you have to start from the foundation in problems. You can't build from the roof down. So if you start from the foundation at this point, right? We in order to pass information, especially in the internet era, right? We have to interact with these languages. I'm using right now. I wrote all these notes and stuff in my computer. And in order to interact with these languages, all languages from Yoruba to Tree, they're in Roman letters. So you already lost a form of control. And as this person, Caitlin Boylan, had pointed out, it was a literal campaign to make African things more accessible to Europeans. So it's in my opinion, you have to focus on gaining that control back, and separating yourself as much as possible from European languages that do affect you in certain ways, which is a difficult thing to ask. But that's all I have, because I'm going everywhere.
Asante sana, ndugu yangu. And ndugu, oh, can you hear me?
Ndio.
Ndugu Masala. What I'll let you do the same thing Ndugu Jabali did. I will not limit you to a question. Given the video, given what Ndugu Obadele was saying, given what Jabali is saying, what thoughts do you have to share? And also, as you share, I would like you to speak about the fact that you are born in Jamaica, raised in the United States.
Born in the US.
Born in the US, raised in Jamaica and the US, where you were taken away from these languages, but you still remained grounded, and now you speak multiple, and learning the multiple African languages has not taken from one or the other, right? It complements each other. So just speak to it, please.
Yeah, so a few things I want to say first. I agree with everything Ndugu Obadele had mentioned earlier. I think Also, if we can get access to that video that I know he did a lecture a while ago on that Greco-Roman baby talk, so if we can sort of provide that to our community, that would be great.
So if you want access to anything that Ndugu Obadele shares, follow. I gave you the link to go to Abibi Tumi. You are an African. Go home to Abibi Tumi. The link is there. I will run it again. Join. Everything is there. All the resources are there. The classes are there for you to access. The languages are there for you to learn. You'll be home with fellow Africans. You can discuss these things, talk about them. So go home. Ndugu Masala tafadhali.
Also, to Ndugu Jabali, you're not the most educated person, according to whom? That's another thing I'd say to you.
He owes us $1. He owes us $1. Every time a Black person talks crap about themselves, you send $1 to Jumuiya Nguzo Saba. That is we're penalizing you. You do not take away your awesomeness. So yeah, you owe us $1. Go on.
So to answer your question now, I have a lot of thoughts with the video. I don't know them. I don't know their research, but what I can say is that one of the reasons why no one else respects our languages, because we don't respect them ourselves. So until you respect your languages and you don't expect or you don't hold people to a standard, for example, if you require when people come into your house to speak an African language, the conversation changes. But as long as we keep continuing to speak in these colonial, the languages of our colonial enemies, nothing will change, right? Because it shows that your attachment to these infections, it's like still your enslavement, you know. And this, while listening to your video and listening to and thinking about this issue, I thought about Ndugu Mzee Ngugi wa Thiong'o again in his lectures. And he has this quote that says, if you speak all the languages of the world, but you don't speak your mother tongue, that is enslavement. Yeah. But if you speak your mother tongue and you speak all of the languages of the world, that is empowerment. So I thought about that in connection to what you said. And I think about my journey, right? As someone who, I speak a lot of languages, you know, and it wasn't until the past, I'd say 4 years now, where I started learning. I came home to learn our languages. So I was learning a lot of our colonial enemies' languages since I was about 2 or so. So now I think, as someone who comes from a revolutionary family, I have a lot of family who were leaders in the Garvey movement in Jamaica. My father used to be very involved in the Nation of Islam. And then, so I sort of grew up in that revolutionary spirit, but it was like always done in a colonial language. And so going to what I mentioned earlier, I think if you're really trying to be on a decolonization path and your ultimate goal is liberation, you as an African have the duty to learn an African language. It's your birthright. And I mentioned this to Ndugu Jabali and Daranduku before. I had this experience when I went to a Senegalese restaurant in Harlem. And, you know, I've been getting really into African food lately. So I went to Harlem to get some Senegalese food. And as soon as you walk in, it's like, you're in Senegal, essentially. And they just greet you in Wolof. Everything's in Wolof. And I'm like, I didn't understand what was going on. So I have to switch into French. But I'm like, look at that. Like they just assume you are a Wolof speaker from when you walk in the door. Imagine if you see a Black person and you just know, just by the fact of them being a Black person, that they speak Kiswahili. Yeah. That would be a powerful idea, right? And I think one way of thinking about this issue on a little deeper level, not to get sort of, I mean, it's all sort of connected, right? You mentioned in your video, culture. You said language is a vehicle to culture. Culture is a vehicle to spirituality. So they are all connected in this web, right? But who are you? In Echo, we say Kabeuwe, and it's one of the most powerful questions we have in that language. Who are you? Kabeuwe, or like. Who, and if you watch the Black Panther movie, what was the theme of the Black Panther movie? What was the phrase they were always saying throughout that movie? Unkobani, 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 Inkosa. They kept saying that. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And why did they ask that? Because that was the way that they would be able to identify each other based on the response to that question. And every single answer to that question was in Kosa. So I think language is a powerful vehicle. In Kiswahili we say kwa kuunganisha na watu ambao wanaongea lugha zingine, right? So it's a way to speak with people who speak different languages. Obviously, everyone knows this, Kiswahili is a lingua franca, but also it's a way that reorients us back into our African consciousness. It takes us back through history. It allows us to be with the language. It's an African language, so once you learn Kiswahili, it's way easier to learn a lot of other Bantu languages, like Lingala, Echo, like Ngeli is something that is also seen in Echo and a lot of other Bantu languages. And it's a superpower, and it's your birthright. Like I said, you can't be, people are going around saying, I'm a Pan-Africanist, I'm African, but can't speak an African language. How much of an African are you? So again, Kabeuwe, or who are you?
And I'm glad you said that, Kabeuwe. Again, the evidence is in the languages. Uwe, Kabeuwe, who are you? In Kiswahili, we say wewe, you, right? The similarity.
Wewe is also you.
Right? Yeah. And Echo is spoken in Equatorial Guinea, which is in the West, and Kiswahili is here. And we think we are so different. We are from the West. We can't talk Kiswahili, but the languages are so similar. So, and again, I pointed out before in Akan, the Che, the KYE that is in Bantu languages. So, Ndugu Obadele, please talk about the writing in Twi, Yoruba, and Wolof that is similar in Metaneta, so that you can show again the interconnectedness, the oneness of our our Ubuntu being.
Oh, can I just say, because it's sort of actually related to the question you just asked, Obemfo Badele. Also, I don't think these researchers, like I said, I don't know them, but I don't think it's possible for them to learn the language, Arabic, without also learning the culture alongside it.
There you go.
Right, because, and I think about this in relation to Medu Neter, for example. There's a very there's a distinction between learning hieroglyphics and learning Medu Neter. You can't learn Medu Neter by just memorizing glyphs. You need to understand nature. You need to study what birds do, all these different birds, there's like 500 different birds in Medu Neter. What do these, you have to study them. Like, why did why did they use this bird in this word? Why did they use a sparrow for the word that represents evil? Why did they use, like, these are the things we have to study. And like, it's not, and I think I don't think those researchers, like, they're studying Arab culture alongside the language.
Yes.
They're not studying the language in a vacuum. And
there's
no way they can block it out and separate it.
Yes. And as we've shown in our culture, in all culture, there's no way to separate the language from the culture. We have been deceived to think that there is, but there isn't. And I'm glad that you pointed that out. Oh, goodness gracious, my thought has gone. Ndugu Badele, tafadhali zungumzia, speak on this as my thought comes back. The writing in Twi, Yoruba, and Wolof that is similar to me.
Yeah, so there's actually a 3-volume series, and that's a series on Akan gold weights, the Akan world of gold weights, and it does show comparisons between the writing that we will find of the Akan, and then also that which you will find in Medu Neter has like a chart at the back. But what I was actually going to refer to was Ndugu Jabali's point about using the Latin script in order to write these languages. And I actually had a time, so I was in survival training back when I lived in the United States. And we had these different encampments. And for the encampment, the assignment was, to be in the bush for, these days, for a set number of days, and you're given, I think it was 3 matches and a knife, and everything else, you have to procure yourself. So what you're going to drink, what you're going to eat, or the shelter you're going to construct. But we're also told that we have to keep a journal, but the journal should be, something that if it fell into enemy hands, that basically to develop some type of code. So anyone who would get the journal wouldn't be able to see what your movements are, so forth and so on. So what I decided to do was to write my journal using Medu-Neter, but not necessarily writing it in Medu-Neter in the sense of Medu-Neter grammar. I was writing Chi using Medu-Neter. You understand? That was one sentence. Then the next sentence would be in Yoruba using Medu-Neter. Then the next sentence would be in Wolof using Medu-Neter, and then going back to the Chi. So the only way someone would be able to decode it is if they knew what I knew. They would have to, one, know the Medu-Neter I was using, and what, each, the transliteration and so forth and so on, and how that mapped onto the Chi. But then they would also have to know Chi. Then they would also have to know Yoruba. Then they'd also have to know Wolof. And then they'd have to synthesize all of that to get the context of what I was doing. So the point I'm driving at is that these are things that are possible. We don't have to rely on the writing systems of our enemies, especially when not only do we have Medu-Neter, we have Nko, which is the writing system used to write Bamanakan. And I mentioned this the other day, African Alphabets by Baba Saki Mafundikwa, where he goes into the writing systems throughout the continent. I remember reading in Daba My Children by Fusama Zulu Kredumutwa, where he actually went into the writing system among the Amazulu to write isiZulu. So like these are some of the things that we can do if we're actually serious about what it is that we're doing. Here in the household, the children learn Medu-Neter. We had a study group. They would always come to the university in order to learn Medu-Neter. And my children are light years ahead of me, because it wasn't until I turned 17 that I even knew that there was a language in the world called Chi. Of course, I had heard of Yoruba, but the only word I knew was Bawani until I took a course in Yoruba. And my first question was, how do I pronounce my name? Because that's my birth name, Obadele. And no one had ever pronounced it correctly to me. People would read it and say, Obadele, or they would say, whatever they would say. So that was my question. And, I actually got a linguistic breakdown of Oba, Ode, Ile, that the king, he arrives at the house. And, it was very profound to actually get the pronunciation and know how the tones actually map to each sound. And then also, we had a discussion yesterday on a Bibitumi about, the need for us to speak our own languages. And, someone mentioned Haiti, Haitian Creole. And, I would think that there would be a lot of revolutionary content in it, but we were saying ultimately, we don't want to have something that is, half crackified, but then, has the other languages in it. But just in terms of the revolutionary content, there are ways to bring that home, in the sense that there really weren't discourses on Black power amongst, Akan speakers when I first came to Ghana. And that's why it was necessary for me to coin Abibitumi, which translates to Black power in Chi. So now, I'll go around, Abibitumi, hey, Abibi Fahudi, and people are actually saying this, and they actually have a concept of what this is. Abibi Fahudi, which translates to, Black liberation, that this is another coinage. So it's not just, oh, well, let me go home and, because I don't have anything to contribute. For me, one of the main things that we have to contribute is a lot of that revolutionary spirit and, a lot of the revolutionary conceptualizations of reality that, I'm sure that there was some level of revolutionary discussion when Nana Santiwa was, smacking the British down, or, amongst the Kikuyu as they were forming the Mau Mau. Unfortunately, a lot of that revolutionary spirit, whatever it may have been at that point in time, you don't get that so much in the language from the speakers, because most of the speakers are, going to church, praying to an imaginary white boy on a stick. Or if they're not doing that, they're praying to a rock in the desert 5 times a day, or if they're not doing that. So a lot of the discourse is very anti-Black. A lot of the discourse is very anti-revolutionary. And I can speak, for the places I've been to. I've been to Ghana, I've been to Nigeria, Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso, Senegal, the Gambia, Mzansi, what they call South Africa, Ethiopia. I could go on. But across the continent, you find people praying to an imaginary crack on a stick. So that's their level of discourse. So again, when we can come, we can look at, all right, what's the revolutionary content in Haitian Creole? And then we can coin using our own languages in order to encapsulate some of those terms. I know they have Kupete Bulekai, like that's a motto. That you could say that in Chi, but that's not like a motto that people would, readily identify with. Cut head, burn house. But that's something that should be something that we're thinking about and articulating in Chi and Yoruba and Wolof, in Medunecha and so forth and so on. And I'll close on this point in Medunecha, because a lot of people are approaching it from let me try to get in touch with my spiritual self and, Kemetic yoga and Kemetic Reiki and Kemetic Kung Fu and Kemetic anything that is crackified, that, they're not necessarily looking for the revolutionary content that's already inside of Medunecha. But when you look at the expulsion of the Hyksos, you can find a lot of revolutionary content in the two stela of Sarah Kamos. When you go into the autobiography of Sarah Weni, where you find the first, implementation of what they call the classic pincer move, which is, a military maneuver where some went to the antelope head, others, arrived by the, by land, and they were able to trap the enemy in between these two formations. You can find a lot of revolutionary content inside of the Medunecha, but there's a proverb in Yoruba that says, "Ohun tojuma lojunri," what the eye is looking for is what it sees. So if you're approaching it saying, well, I know yoga, so where can I find yoga on these walls? Or I know Reiki, so where can I find Reiki on these walls? Or I know French fries, so where can I find, oh, that's French fries, or that's a spaceship, or that's a helicopter. Just read the thing, and you'll find that what's actually there is much more revolutionary than the things that people are trying to superimpose on our great grandsters. So I'll pause on that.
Asante sana. And you're bringing some vocabulary to our community. They crackified, right? They just heard that one. Some of them crackified. So one of these days, you know what? Head to Abibi to me. He might give you a lesson or two about what crackified is. So I gave you the link there. Dugu Jabali, you're coming up next. But I wanted to say, I just encountered Geshande, which is the Kikuyu way of writing, and it blew my mind. I have been amongst my brothers and sisters of the Kikuyu peoples for years. I went to school with them on their lands, and I never knew that they had a way of writing that is very similar to Metaneta. Very similar. For example, there was the word, and I was looking as Ndugu Obadile was talking, I was looking quickly at my Instagram to get our sister's name there. She is sharing this knowledge. She's of the Gikuyu people, and she's sharing this knowledge on Instagram. If anyone knows her, please share it in the chat. If I may get a chance to get her information while Ndugu Jabali is speaking, and I'll share it in the chat so that you can go there. But the letter, the descriptive writing form of the word that represents leaders, right, is similar to Metaneta. It has that top part of it. And I am enjoying this process of sitting in our languages and seeing the similarities. I'm enjoying this process of sitting in Kiswahili and finally seeing it for its the Ubuntu in it, right? I'm walking away from Africa, Ndugu Obadile. As you can see, the struggle is real. Every time I get ready to say it, I'm like, no, not the right word. Ndugu Jabali, talk about the data, and you had a point you wanted to say before, so speak on that. And also the work that we're doing, collecting the data, and the fact that this is so Ndugu Jabali is not getting paid by Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, but he has a passion for the language, and he loves his Ubuntu self so much more than money, right? That he's willing to do the work because it's needed in the moment. He's not the African who wants to do only when you have given them money, right? That's another way we have to stop thinking. that you always have to be compensated financially to serve your community. We also have to start walking away from that. I get it. We have bills to pay. That is the song that you all sing, you Africans. I get that. I have bills as well, but sometimes it's not about that. Ndugu Jabali, please, tafadhali.
Oh, and my question was really my question was where can we apply this in practice? Because I understand. Hold on, I understand what and I agree with what Kako Abadale was saying. But the issue that we face is that there's nowhere because we live in a technological era, right? So information is traveling through technology. If we rely on pen and paper information, it's never going to get out. It's going to, unless we're going to write on paper and then take pictures and then send it online. But where can we practice this and put these concepts into practice? Because that's a great problem we have right now. There's nowhere that you can go. If I wanted to send an email right now, we speak about the letters in Metanetra. We speak about the letters in I forgot the other language that was said that have their own writing like script as well as Kikuyu, I believe. But where can I go right now if I wanted to explore with that and type right now and use these letters to write an email? We can't do it, so we have to catch up in these regards and being because like with Arabic, you can write in Arabic. You can type in Arabic. You can type in all these other languages that have their own symbols. But this is where in my opinion, we have to spend a lot of time in creating the technology so that we can put this into practice. If we wanted to explore right now in using Metanetra to write in Kiswahili or using it to write in other languages, how can we do that? Because a lot of people are going to want to contribute and give their ideas. So we definitely I would definitely like to see some way we could create a space to be able to do that. But that's a technological thing. As far as the data, oh yeah, I mean I deal with data in my regular time. That's what I really love, especially when it comes to languages, specifically the subject of natural language processing, which I will often refer to. I always try to teach our people about that concept of natural language processing within technology because it's the reason that we can't do what I was just speaking about because we don't have enough effort into the natural language processing to be able to create a space where we can just type in our own symbols and create these different symbols. If we wanted to create symbols from scratch, how can we do that? You see what I'm saying? And then be able to put them into practice and send you an email and send you a message or whatever, so on and so forth. So with data, yes, I've been collecting data, build my own database, a database to be able to analyze these different Bantu languages. Uh, and I started trying to do a little bit. I'm still learning every day and continuing to expand my knowledge on natural language processing because it's a very important it's a critical field and natural language processes natural language processing is the foundation of artificial intelligence. This spike in artificial intelligence that we see, natural language processing attributes to that. That is a lot of data and teaching a computer how to understand human language to be able to translate it back to you and give it to you in a way that you will be able to interpret immediately and understand on a higher level. So I feel like that's a very important thing in Africans collecting their own data. You see what I'm saying? Because right now, if you wanted to find a list of the top 5 Bantu languages and their vocabulary, you have to turn to those means and sources. And there's a lot of things that you can create. Like I said, being able to create artificial intelligence as this database grows and I do more analysis on it, I can start to explore with creating an AI that only speaks in Swahili and you can communicate it with in Swahili only, and it gives you back information, et cetera, et cetera. But uh, right now, at the foundational level, it's really about just collecting the data and analyzing the similarities between these languages. And in some of the research that I've been doing already, I've even found similarities between the numbering system between Bantu languages and Kwa languages, which is from the West African region, and how you fundamentally set up, with building on the numbers, as well as doing from doing the analysis because I never before I started doing the database, I never really looked at a large sample of Bantu languages together to be able to find out certain things. But I found that one thing that you teach when you hear about Swahili in the beginning is that, well, in regards to numbers, you hear that Swahili is a base 10 language, as most Bantu languages are. It's base 10. However, from doing this database and analyzing it, you see that there's a lot of Bantu languages that are actually base 5 languages. So that you start to build on the concept of 5. So once you reach the number 5, it becomes 5 and 1 to reach 6, 5 and 2 to reach 7, so on and so forth. So that shows you a base 5 nature, and you find that a lot in the southern languages from what I've been finding. So I think it's very important to keep doing this analysis, and I'm trying to continue to expand it. Continue, if anybody out there is into data and wants to join these projects and things of that nature, I would definitely love to speak with as many minds as possible, because it's a very important, crucial topic to getting African languages into the internet space or the digital space, so that we can use African languages in the ways that we would like.
Yeah. So a group of us are coming together. It's not just Jumuiya and Nguzo Saba, right? It's Jumuiya and Nguzo Saba. We have a Bibi Tumi, Brother Obadele. We welcome other Africans. And I was gonna quickly just show that, which blew my mind. Her writing in Geshande. That is Gikuyu.
That's
That
beautiful.
Gikuyu.
She needs to write that and send it to me.
Yes.
So we can build a program to be able to put that into typing, because that's the more important thing. That's wonderful. That's the foundation of what we need in the data collection. We need to collect this data and then build programs so that we can use it in practical settings. Oh my God, Kako.
Yeah, if I could share my screen briefly.
Yes, please.
So this is, again, is good that some of us that we're all coming together with different perspectives and different backgrounds. So I'm just going to share my screen on the point of typing using Medunecha. So this is a program called JSesh, and this is the 2 Stella of Sarah Kamos. And when you go to any line, you'll see down here at the bottom, that this is the code that you use in order to get the Medunecha that you see right here. And it, also does the arrangements in terms of.
I don't see your screen.
Let me bring it up. Let me bring it up.
No, I don't see it.
There you go.
Let
All
me
right.
try it.
Start over. I brought it up. It was me who.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the Stela of Sarah Kamos, and it goes into the different versions of it with the so-called Carnarvon tablet, and then also the Stela. And when you click on this, so I'm on this line, this is the code that you're typing in down here at the bottom in order to get the Medunecha that you see here. And when you see the colon, this is so that you can write one glyph on top of the other. When you see the dash, this is to separate and go to the next glyph, and so forth and so on. When you see the 2 square brackets, this is so that you can get, the what they refer to as the cartouche and the different symbols that you see here. So all of this is, a program that can be used, and this is what we actually use right now. So this is pulling from that Stela, and this is a translation that I'm working on with Seba Bodnochi Montgomery, our Medunecha instructor, there on Abibitumi, as well as Okunini Talawa Adudo. So what we're doing is that we're typing the Medunecha here, and then we're doing translations into Akan, into Yoruba, into what we call Ebonics, and erecting mad monuments, right? And then also into Jamaican, right? And that's, of course, Okunini Talawa Adudo. So all of this is here in terms of not only being able to type in Medunecha, but then for it to be able to be used, because this is working towards a book that we have on this. And, for each one, we have a commentary, we have a Dinkra in here, so forth and so on. So we're actually just about done with the first Stela. And then when we come down, we go to the second Stela. And this is, again, just to the point of, these things can be typed. They actually can be typed. And, this is another story here of Sanhat. And this is all, typed in. So, you'll code it. And then once you know the meta-nature and you know what the codes are, this is operating on Manuel de Codage, which is the code manual for meta-nature. So once you know what the Gardner symbols are, then as soon as you see it, you know exactly what you're typing and how you're typing it, so forth and so on. You can do these in vertical columns. You can do them right to left. You can do them left to right, and so forth and so on. But this is already, very practical in terms of this. And then also, when I'm writing papers, I can probably pull up another document, but it's basically similar to what you see on the shared document. I'm actually using meta-nature. I actually just completed a chapter where I'm using meta-nature all throughout the chapter. And again, that's to the point of Ontojunwa Lojunri, what the eye is looking for is what it will see. And once we're actually looking for these things and we're very serious about these things, then we'll start to unearth, all the tools that are available. Just the other day, I was showing someone an app where it's a game where you can go through the different glyphs of meta-nature, and it's like it's called hieroglyph flashcards. So the children play this so that they know, oh, this is this is sh. It has the uniliterals, the biliterals, and the triliterals. There's another app, and this is again to the point of, the practicalization of it, where it has the names of all of the rulers of classical Kemet. You have another one that has the Gardner Dictionary. So all of these things are out there, and they're actually being used, for publications, used for actual scholarship and the like.
Ndugu Obadele, do you have any of the names of those apps?
Yeah, so I can actually type those in there, but the hieroglyph flashcards is the name of that app.
Okay.
Gardner Dictionary is the name of another app. And so I know that all of those are available on Android. I can actually probably just go to them on my phone if you can see them. I have my phone here, which is a Mara phone made in Rwanda, by the way. But let's see. Yeah, so this one is called Dictionary.
Come closer.
Gardner. So I'm gonna go to this one. It's hieroglyph flashcards. When I click on it, I don't know how well you can see it, but it comes up with the spinning meta-nature, and then it'll go straight into the game for you if you can see that well. So here you have kh, right? So then the children will know, oh, well, that's this one, right? And it'll be correct. You have se. So then the children know, oh, that's the folded bolt of cloth. That's right here. So you click on that. So it's actually games that you can use on your phone, and that the children, they'll play with it like any other game. So they're like, I was in college before I started being exposed to this, where the children are actually getting this, from their infancy, basically from their infancy of learning the meta-nature, learning how to read it, learning how to write it, so that their worldview is already expanded beyond Latin and then beyond.
See, they don't like when we're sharing this wisdom with each other. Ndugu Jabali, inaonekana wewe na mimi tutahitaji kuchukua kimetaneta ili tupate njia ya kuandika Kiswahili katika lugha zetu za Kiafrika.
Mimi kweli napendelea kutumia herufi tofauti kama herufi kama Kikuyu
na Gishandi
inatosha vizuri.
Tutajifunza na ndugu Obadele atufunze ili tuweze kuandika Kiswahili katika lugha za Kiafrika. Again, thank you all for joining us. There's so much to say, limited time. Again, as you can see, we've gone past our regular time. Ndugu Obadele, we thank you for coming out into these woods of colonialism to be with us. We know you don't like venturing into these areas. We are grateful for him joining us and sharing all that wisdom. Again, I shared for those of you who want to work with us, that's our email. Send an email to us. We do not want to get brownie stars and recognition as Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba. We want to return and see our brothers and sisters return to our way of Ubuntu. Therefore, we will work with everyone. We want to work with everyone who's willing to do that. So join us, please, in the work. Again, find your way home. This is the link to find your way home. Atabibi Tumi. If you need the information Ndugu Obadele was sharing, it is there. If you need to reach Ndugu Obadele, he is found there. He is not, again, I will say he is not in these colonizer spaces. So move on there and get access to him if you want to learn more about who you are. Ndugu Zetu, any last words before we close? Everyone, just feel free to share. What last word do you have for our brothers and sisters as we close up today? Anyone?
Should I go? Okay.
Anyway, you know what? Let's follow African protocol. Yes, Ndugu Obadele tafadhali.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to share a talk that I gave on the Greco-Roman baby talk.
Yes, please.
And basically going into the breakdown of all these terms that we think are just so magical and so scientific, but it's literally like a infant babbling, gibberish. All of these, terms. When you say lithium, it just comes from lithos, which means rock. Which one of our languages doesn't have a word for rock? Like whatever you're thinking about, oh, this is just so magical and so forth and so on. Once you actually look into the etymology of it, you're like, this is Greco-Roman baby talk. So that was a talk that I gave at the launch of the Spelling G. And this is where, youth and adults alike are, going to have a spelling competition in indigenous languages. So Chi is represented, Eve is represented, Ga is represented, Dagbani is represented. And I'm one of those who's been, championing that cause along with Baby Kafo, which is the organization. Just had signed an MOU with the Ministry of Education here in Ghana for that to be taken up. So school children are actually learning how to spell, in our languages. And, these are the things that, I think they show a lot of effort in the right direction, in terms of how even that spelling is done, because there's, the alphabet is not ABC, B, D. So it's actually the phonetic rendering of each sound, and so forth and so on. So these are just some of the initiatives that are going on right now. We've discussed quite a bit, but one thing I would like for, people to just understand is that, once we are looking for something, we will find it. And if we can't find it, then we can create it. And I think that's where Ndugu Jabali comes in. He's doing a lot of great work. You yourself, you're doing a lot of great work. Dada Nduku, Brother Ilarote is doing a lot of Black powerful work. So, a lot is going on, but I think it's good for us to not be, in these individual silos. And it's also good for us not to be on cracker platforms because, when we're on cracker platforms, it's very difficult for us to get Black content, especially when the Black people who know about that content refuse to go onto those platforms. So then, the cracker platform just becomes echo chambers of people who are saying the same things or exposed to the same things. And it's really like a groupthink type of situation. Whereas those who have left the digital plantation and gone to the digital Quilombo are, having access to a lot more and are thinking differently and are exposed to different things and are sharing resources differently. Because why in the world would we share liberatory information, on cracker platforms? Like that's not where we live. Nana Harriet Tubman only went there to get people off there. So if you ever see me on a cracker platform, it's usually because Nduku invited me. But other than that, it's the only thing I'm going to tell you when I'm at the cracker platform is leave the cracker platform. Again, Nana Harriet Tubman did not chill out on the plantation. She went to the plantation to tell people, get off the plantation. I'm here to help. And it's not like I'm not, there's no space for you to go to. I'm actually getting you on the underground railroad, the digital underground railroad to where we can have some Abibi Fahudie as opposed to sitting in Cracker Massa Zuckerberg's Facebook jail. You said you tried to post a link on Crackerbook, and the Crackerbook said, no, you're not allowed to post anything revolutionary. Now, y'all could talk about ADOS, y'all could talk about FBA, y'all could talk about LGBTQ and all of the other alphabet soup people, but you cannot talk about Black liberation. You can't even post a link to something that will free you. Now, if that doesn't tell you that they don't want you on the plantation, then I don't know what's going to tell you that. However, again, we entreat anyone who is interested to leave the cracker plantation, come to the land of Black people, just as was said in the text Sanhat that was mentioned earlier. He says, make your return to the land of Black people. And if we can really think about things in that way, I think there's a lot of liberatory, Black powerful, lessons there for us. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi.
Habibi Tumi. Ndugu Jabali.
No, I don't really have any thoughts right now. It was a good, interesting conversation. I definitely learned a lot. And
Ndugu Masala.
So I'm going to speak in Icho for some of my comments, and then I'll translate them after. Nanatole Icho Nkwao. Nanatole Teita Ilo Taula. Lotoloau. Lotoro Tole Icho Loeba. Corina Ballo Lawaula. Totoro Paragamento Teta. Nabayola Veta Labola. Labola Lotole Loeba. La Muhimusan. Palatole Tocambanta. Baragavita Kita. Balatole Bargatata. Lavayola. Per bicche. Bicche Loeba. E sequella. E chobo. E rique mamma. Pacho ama batoro tole Icho Loeba. Patoro tole Kiswahili. Kilengala. Ki Echu. Ki Chui. Ki Wolof. Bala tole Icho Loeba. E loto lau. Totoro tola loto lau Loeba. La waiola. La bolla. Totoro Loeba. Totoro Rantai. Ike Taraganda. Totoro ucha. Totoro kuecha uchesa. Oh, just la bayo la lora lore ebica ebilaba. Eba rivella. Ebila rivela etta. Elo talao. Poto. So essentially, in Echo, I said it's important for us, we need to speak our languages with our children. Speak your languages with your children. Speak it with your ancestors. Speak it with your parents. Speak it at home. Speak it with the community. The Ubuntu community. I'm not going to say the African community because you got me saying no, don't say that word. So speak it with the Ubuntu community. And that includes all of the various, what the Western world calls spirits, all the various entities, all the beingness that is. It's very important that we do that. And once you do that, it will open like like it will open up the entire world of your beingness once you know an African language, especially Kiswahili. It's our language of ebiya, like kuanganisha.
Umoja.
Yeah, exactly, to connect.
Yes.
And synthesize. So yes, speak it to your children, speak it all whenever you have an opportunity to speak. It's very important for our liberation.
Lugha ya muungano wetu.
Abibi Fahodie.
Habibi Tumi. All right, everyone. Asanteni, siku njema, kwaherini. Stay on, brothers, real quick, please. Don't leave.